Hi everyone, welcome to our special segment on the developments from the recent INC-4 negotiations. This is Sonia Astudillo, Senior Communications Officer for GAIA Asia Pacific, and today we're delving into the crucial outcomes and surprises of the global plastics treaty negotiations. Joining me is Arpita Bhagat, GAIA Asia Pacific's Plastic Policy Officer. Hi Arpita.
Hello.
So Arpita, what happened on the last day of GPT? Did it end the way we expected it to, or was there an unexpected turn of events?
So we had the day of subgroups still trying to get through what was their mandate, that is to finish the second round of reading as well as like to do proper textual negotiations. It was not finished for the entire Device Zero draft as one could imagine, because there was a lot of text and member states were busy, adding and bracketing a lot of the text. But in the evening, we had the plenary where the real action was expected, and that's what happened. The plenary ran up till I think 4 a.m. almost. That was the last person leaving, which is incredibly crazy. I mean, this is the longest any day has lasted for any INC so far. So that was the flow. And of course, we were expecting things to turn around from the history previously. Things tend to either happen early on in the negotiations or towards the later half. And things turned around, quite suddenly, unexpectedly, dramatically. Essentially, the main thing on the agenda was the mandate for intersessional work and the topics. And the chair presented his proposal, which was itself quite weak. It did not include polymers, primary plastic polymers, or even polymers of concern, if I'm not wrong. It included financial mechanism, but with a very weak language. It says analysis of potential resources and means that could be mobilized for implementation. And of criteria for plastic products and chemicals of concern, including product design. So this did not receive consensus. As you know, we are still operating with the decision-making via consensus, given that voting as a rule is not applicable as yet because there was no agreement reached. The expectation also of civil society was that somehow any conflict that happens, there could be potential voting that takes place, and then we could set some kind of a voting precedent. None of that actually happened. So after the chair's proposal didn't get through, there was a lot of huddle, informal, where basically you had this large group of member states gathering around almost in a circle, consulting. And the buck came to a stop with two sets of sides almost. One which wanted to go through with the chair's original proposal, US, EU, most of the donor countries, essentially, the developed countries who were be expected to fund the treaty on one side. And on the other side, you had the developing countries who saw this, specifically the African group, who saw through the chair's proposal and saw through the fact that the way the finance is mentioned, it's very weak. It would not lead to the development of a dedicated fund, which we know is the need for a treaty to have proper implementation, because existing funds are quite limited. Whether you look at Global Environment Facility Fund or otherwise, we knew that there has to be a proper investigation of the sources and a proper thinking around what that source would look like. And hopefully that would be a dedicated fund. So you had Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Iran on one side, trying to rally support. And there was, I think, about an hour and a half of that huddling happening. And then we went back. The chair called the session back to motion and went over the other agenda items, the time and date for the next INC, the provisional agenda for the next INC, and many other things which were non-controversial. So they were easy to get through. I think he was just trying to keep things moving along. It was wee hours of the night. Everybody was tired, sleepy, of like past 10 days. And eventually, when the suspended plenary resumed, the proposal that was brought forth to the chair was via consensus. So there was rallying, but essentially everyone was able to come to a consensus, including Africa Group, including the Pacific Small Island Developing States, a lot of the other ambitious countries. And the proposal they had, let me just read it out verbatim so that I'm not, rephrasing anything. So there are two important points. I'm not going through the nuances of every, other points, but the main point is the committee decides to establish an ad hoc intersessional open-ended expert group to develop an analysis of potential sources and means that could be mobilized for implementation of the objectives of the instrument, including options for the establishment of a financial mechanism, alignment of financial flows, and catalyzing finance for the consideration by the committee at its 5th session. So this is very well framed. This is kind of a proposal that, groups pushed forward with the African group region support, because if you read it carefully, it includes stock taking of all the potential resources. It looks at implementation of the entire objectives, right? Not just a specific obligation. And it looks at the flow, because we know that the financial flows of the existing funding, environmental fund that we have, has been weak, and it has left behind the countries most in need. So this is there, which is good news for us. But also point to note is that it says open-ended expert group. It does not say open-ended working group. So an expert group means this particular intersessional work could be limited, could limit participation of civil society. It will only have participation, or at least this is what it reads like right now, of experts, technical experts. And that could, and of course, we tried to raise the concern around that. It didn't get addressed in yesterday's plenary, and the hope is we continue to advocate for inclusion, because we know as civil society, as rights holders, as marginalized communities, as affected communities, we are key partners for this treaty. So we cannot be left behind. So that's one. The second was in terms of intersessional work decision. The committee also decides to establish an ad hoc intersessional open-ended expert group to identify and analyze criteria and non-criteria based approaches with regards to plastic products and chemicals of concern in plastic products and product design, focused on recyclability and reusability of plastic products, considering its uses and application for the consideration by the committee at INC-5. Now this again, of course, it looks at chemicals of concern, but it says chemicals of concern in plastic products. So it looks at, this is not what we've been advocating. It looks at chemicals, not in plastic as a material, but as products. So the phrasing around criteria, non-criteria is also difficult to interpret, and we will need, technical expertise, experts to tell us what that really means. But it is not something that is clear, right? The hope is that there will be identification of hazardous plastic chemicals in products to address the treaty's implementation over time. But the big concern that civil society and the movement has is that there has been no mandate on intersessional work on primary plastic polymers. In fact, there's been no mandate for polymers, and this is what the like-minded group of countries, the countries who do not want an ambitious treaty, has been trying to prevent. But the larger expose, if I can call it that, for yesterday was the politics of donor countries versus recipient countries, and how donor countries want to only finance, at least if you look at EU, they want to only finance a treaty which has high ambition on, for example, primary plastic polymers. And they don't want to finance countries who are producers of plastics. And we know that developing, the way developing is defined right now, the developing countries would include plastic producers like China, like Saudi Arabia, like many of the other oil producing petchem heavy countries, which they don't want to finance. So that's where the politics came into play, and unfortunately or fortunately, we have the compromise and we have the mandate that we have. The format of the intersessional work is not very clear. The expectation is that there would be 2 electronic meetings, and maybe an in-person meeting between now and INC-5, which is in November. And the hope is that there will be openness for civil society participation, and it wouldn't have influence of industry and all the vested interest. So we need to keep pushing for that, because we don't want to be left out of the room. But finally, after all of this, some observers, specifically the Indigenous Peoples Caucus, the Youth Coalition, managed to make statements. But the sentiment in the room was not very positive, and rightly so, because we have been in the fight for polymers cut, right? Like plastic cuts. And of course, we want to phase out hazardous chemicals, and we want transparency and traceability of chemicals, but we need production controls if we want a strong treaty, and that question remains. Moreover, another concerning problem is that the rules of procedure debate wasn't reopened. It somehow it was not allowed to surface. We also don't know what goes on behind the scenes, the political maneuvers, because up until, another fact that I should mention, up until a day before the plenary, where chair invited, again made the proposal for intersessional work, at least 50 countries strongly supported intersessional work on primary plastic polymers. And yesterday, a day before night, sorry, the sense of time is completely messed up for me. It was, of course, Rwanda and Peru's proposal for PPP to be included in intersessional, but it got 50 plus countries to support. Yesterday, it was only 5 countries at the last plenary. So the turn of events was, it's like it's 50 versus INC-4, there is no comparison. Things get more complicated when you consider the fact that a lot of the member states had actually left. So the key decision for INC-4 was left till the last moment for the wee hours. People have been working for 10 days. The African countries have been working for more than that because they had a regional meeting right before for 4 days. So people had been tired, they're old people, they're people with health issues. A lot of the member states, especially the good ones, had left the room. The smaller delegation, the economically poorer delegations had actually were starting to leave by the time this discussion actually happened, which puts to question once again the process that is being followed in these negotiations. And I'll stop there.
So do we have at least some wins for the civil society organizations? I mean, the 50 plus going down to 5 is definitely not a win, but we have at least some wins.
Yeah, so the 50 plus countries in support is in record. It was said in plenary. We have evidence of it. We can hold, bring those countries back. We also had tremendous amount of progress in terms of the work actually done on the text at this INC. And observers say the amount of work that has happened in the last INC, in this INC, should have been something we had done in the first two INCs. So we have done a lot of work. There has been actual negotiations on text. There was actual streamlining of text, so to say. So there were substantial negotiations here in Ottawa. But countries are still walking away with the text that is not really easy for Busan. There's some text which has been streamlined and there has been deletions, but there have also been additions. So we have text which has a large number of options. And if you have a large number of options, you're again going to be in the same position as you are now, of trying to reduce options, trying to get some agreements and so on. And in terms of bracketing, so this is basically text which is bracketed. In this INC, negotiators have inserted nearly 2,000 brackets in the treaty text, leaving the committee with a bewildering total of 3,686 brackets to resolve before the treaty adoption in Busan. So it's very clear this is a nearly impossible task. Brackets basically mean that there isn't 100% agreement on that particular word, term, sentence. In certain cases, member states have bracketed the entire provision. So, for example, polymers are bracketed everywhere by some group of countries who have deliberately done so. So you cannot have a treaty which has text which is in brackets, right? You need to remove that. And so it looks very unlikely that we will be able to do that kind of a momentous work in one INC meeting, which is also why EU at the very last minute proposed this idea of an INC 4.2. That means we don't close this INC, but continue it through another meeting with an intersessional sort of meeting before, and then an actual INC before we get to Busan, which would have meant that we at least try to stay on the timeline of till INC5. It was unanimously rejected, and I think especially so by the like-minded group, the likes of Iran, Saudi Arabia, and so on. But so in terms of the wins, yes, there've been wins. Everything is still there. Everything is bracketed. but it's still there. So the actual removals happen when the bracket starts going, when you have to remove the bracket. That's where you need to get agreement. But in terms of actual negotiations, a lot of work has been done. Uh, there have been very, very long nights the last 10 days. For those of us here, for the negotiators, it has been very difficult time. But the buck now comes to politics and how we move that in the favor of a ambitious treaty.
So let's look at the Asia Pacific countries. Do we have more champions now than INC-3, and are we expecting more champions for INC?
We should always have more champions. We should always expect more. At least that's what we want. I think the Pacific Small Island Developing States as a group really organized themselves even more strongly and stood up as a strong voice this time around. We want to continue to strengthen their voice. Sorry, I have a cold. We also have this time Philippines coming out very strongly, calling repeatedly for full life cycle approach, speaking very strongly on plastic, primary plastic polymers and chemicals, and all of those issues pretty much align with us. We had Thailand emerging as a very interesting leader in calling for a full life cycle approach. So we had some really good progress this time around. We still continue to struggle with some of the countries. But we need to unravel politics behind the scenes to actually move the needle, as they say, for action. So I would say it's been better than the last time in terms of the region itself. But there is a lot more to be done, and there will be a lot more to be done till we have a treaty, after we have a treaty, because we have to get implementation right. But to ensure all of that, we need to have good financial mechanism, and we need to have a strong treaty that does not ignore polymers. You can't have a plastics treaty without polymers, right? It's just meaningless.
So what will happen after this? Will there be a group working on the draft before INC-5, and how are the CSOs going to be involved?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the secretariat, UNEP, will be putting out the outcome report, and actually they've started to put out the report already as of this morning. They have their draft report, draft decision already up for anyone who is interested. Sorry, I started reading the report. But essentially, the secretariat will be streamlining the text, cleaning it up further, without actually removing any of the positions that member states expressed based on the work that has been done, and creating a revised draft. Because the thing is, the discussions in the INC, as we spoke about in the very beginning, was done, you had this massive, and you broke down that massive document into parts, and then those parts were discussed. And when you're discussing each part, you're trying to remove repetitions, duplications, then you validate that member states are okay with the streamlining, and then you're trying to negotiate what you have. So bracketing is happening, deletions, additions, all of that is happening. So each of those parts has a new text. It might be similar to what they started with. It might be slightly different. It might be slightly smaller. It might be slightly longer. Now somebody has to put it all together into what we will call, I don't know what we will call it. Would it be first draft? Would it be revised zero draft, or something else? That the secretariat will come up with that. We'll know in a few weeks from now. But that draft is what will become will be taken to the next INC. So right as of now, I don't have the analysis to tell you whether this draft would be longer or shorter than what we started with the revised zero draft. The hope was it would be cleaner, but it would be bracketed. So it will be a very different challenge again to deal with, right? So yeah, that's the long and short answer for that.
So what are your hopes for INC5, given like everything is up there at this point?
Well, INC5 is in Busan in Republic of Korea. So it's in Asia. So it's very important for us as Asians to show up and to show up our solutions, to expose the concerns we have, for solutions in the region, and to really hold our countries accountable. I think one of the things that we might have mentioned in one of the newsrooms, but I think it's good to as we are summarizing everything, it's good to bring up again, is that in Asia, on record, in the official list of participants that Secretariat has, there were industry which were part of the official delegation of two countries, not two, sorry, three countries officially, no, four actually. So four in Malaysia, three in Thailand, two in Iran, one each in China, Kazakhstan, Kuwait had industry, that means fossil fuel and chemical industry, as part of their official delegation. Now, this is official. I also know that there are other countries who had petrochemical and polymer producers as part with them as their delegates. I cannot name them because I don't have public record, but there are. So these are the kind of things that are concerning. And the hope is going into next INC, we have, of course, we are able to keep polymers on the table, push for primary plastic polymers, and try to see how rules of procedure can be brought up. These would be priorities, but as in Asia Pacific region, how do we support progressive champions, essentially, as well as we try to tackle the problematic countries and see what kind of, outside in, inside out, what kind of pressure works. So a lot of work again, but also a big opportunity for us Asians to showcase the solutions that we already have to our member states, to the entire world, and also find ways to incentivize our member states to present. We have a lot of interesting policies. I think it's also about seeing how those could be further scaled up, especially how could reuse be scaled up. So that's on my mind for now, is all I can say.
So lastly, is INC5 going to be the last INC? I think that's a question that we've all been asking since last INC, INC3.
Sonia, do you want a short answer or a long one?
Up to you.
The short answer is no. The long answer is complicated, but it's unlikely. I mean, if you look at how much work we have to do, no, don't think so.
So thank you so much, Arpita. Any other information that you want our viewers to know, especially our members in Asia Pacific?
No, just thank you for following the treaty negotiations. I hope we've been able to give you the information you want to have. I would love some feedback. And I would also invite any questions that our members have. And I hope to keep working with our members and keep having more members engaged. I think one thing to point out was, the presence of Cambodia and Laos delegation this time around. They have not been participating. It was interesting. So um, I'm just urging our members who have not yet engaged in the treaty to think about it. And anyone in the public space, I mean, anyone in the civil society who believes in zero waste, who believes that we need a world without plastic pollution, to join GAIA, to join our movement, and to please empower all of us in our world to stop plastic pollution for our good health, for our well-being, and also the well-being of our planet, our children, and our parents and grandparents as well. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arpita, for sharing your valuable insights and helping us understand the intricate dynamics at play here at INC-4 negotiations. To our viewers, please stay tuned for INC-5. The Zero Waste Asia Newsroom will be right there for you to bring you the latest updates and analysis as these important discussions continue. But while you wait for the fifth round, you can also follow our social media pages, Zero Waste Asia on Instagram and YouTube, and GAIA Asia Pacific on Facebook and LinkedIn for news and updates. Until then, keep advocating for less plastic, more life. Thank you for watching. This is Sonia Astudillo for Zero Waste Asia Newsroom, signing off.